Most kids and teenagers in the mid-2020s probably never realized that they were watching an animated show that wasn't actually made in Japan. Yep, this animation was a Western production that was heavily influenced by anime, especially when it came to building a world with a strong sense of identity, a world that broadly reflected the civilization and cultures of Asia, from the South Pole all the way to the North Pole. All of that philosophical complexity was wrapped into the animation and expressed through material arts movement, represented by 4 different elements. Sounds pretty complicated for a kid cartoon, right? Well, that's exactly the point. Avatar: The Last Airbender managed to stand out and highlight its own uniqueness, which naturally attracted audiences at the time. Kids were curious and wanted to sit in front of their TVs and see what this show was all about. So, how did this supposedly original idea come to life, achieve so much appreciation, and eventually earn such a special place in people's heart? Let's talk about it here on Breaking the IP. Nickelodeon was an American pay TV channel that provided entertainment for young audiences, especially children. Following its vision of Kid First back in 1977, Dr. Vivian Horner, a child education expert and one of the people behind Nickelodeon's original concept, encouraged parents to give their children educational experiences in a safe and welcoming environment. That foundation was strengthened during the 1980s when Geraldine Laybourne, who was leading Nickelodeon at the time, defined the channel's branding by putting children's rights at the forefront. This included giving animation creators greater control over their creative choices and presenting imperfect characters as role models, characters who weren't perfect but were honest and relatable. Examples include Helga from Hey Arnold and Angelica from Rugrats. This foundation eventually inspired the two friends, Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Koznitko, better known as Bryke, to reject the idea that children's entertainment had to be overly simple. Instead, they wanted to respect their young audience intelligence by creating something with genuine emotional depth. The idea started in the spring of 2001 when Brian drew a random sketch of a bald young boy with an arrow on his head who had a flying bison. He then went to Mike, who happened to be watching a documentary about an expedition to the South Pole, and the two ideas were combined. From there, they developed the concept further, creating a set of rules for manipulating natural elements and combining them with large-scale world building. The original concept was actually a sci-fi world where the bald kid was someone from the future who had survived a technological apocalypse. He was also accompanied by a one-eyed robot monkey alongside his bison. Eventually, they presented the concept to Nickelodeon's vice president at the time, Eric Coleman, who immediately approved the project after 2 weeks of discussion. Bragi then seriously entered the development phase, cutting out unnecessary ideas and adding elements that they felt the story actually needed. The sci-fi elements that originally served as the main theme were eventually replaced with fantasy elements inspired by Asian mythology, history, and philosophy, with additional influence from Native American cultures. The project originally had a much more ambitious concept. Brian imagined the boy as the leader of an entire herd of flying bison. However, might suggest narrowing the story down so the plot wouldn't become too scattered, with a single sky bison serving as the main companion instead. Aside from being tired of classic Western fantasy such as The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, Bright used Asian philosophy as the foundation of their concept of elemental manipulation, which was divided into 4 branches. They understood that the concept had deep roots in ancient Asian philosophy. For example, there was Wuxing, an ancient Chinese philosophical theory that explains various phenomena in the universe based on the Shujing, one of the 5 classics of Confucianism. There was also Mahabhuta, which described fundamental elements connected to highest consciousness, Brahman, and space, or Akasa, and described in the Taittiriya Upanishad. They also practiced this interest personal through yoga and meditation as part of their fascination with Eastern spiritual philosophy.
4-element theory is in many cultures, including ancient Buddhism. Mike and I it was just this universal thing, and it's something you connect with really quickly. you could say one or two of the elements and people fill in the blanks. And so we liked that the world, you got it.
Braiki himself acknowledged their personal interest in Asian culture. One major example was anime, which influenced the show's art style, emotional depth, and storytelling approach. According to the official art book Avatar: The Last Airbender, the art of the animated series, published by Dark Horse Books, they were heavily influenced by their love of the works of Hayao Miyazaki's Studio Ghibli, as well as works by director Shinichiro Watanabe, such as Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo. Another influence that would later become important to the show's action and comedy came from Hong Kong cinema. Their kung fu choreography was combined with other elements such as sports in Shaolin soccer in a fun and entertaining way, as well as with the beauty and elegance seen in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. They also hired a martial arts expert named Shifu Kisu as a consultant, so the animators would have a foundation for creating movements and looked organic, realistic, physically grounded, and accurate. Shifu Kisu matched the spiritual, philosophy, and physical characteristics of the four natural elements with four traditional Chinese kung fu styles. Waterbending was based on Tai Chi, which is characterized by following flexible and gentle movements that can still be deadly. In practice, waterbending focuses on lightening the body's energy with constant following movements. Its main principle is non-redirect and opponents attack back at them, just like water, which can adapt to the shape of its container while also deflecting and bouncing objects away from itself. Earthbending was based on hunger, which is characterized by being solid, powerful, immovable, and defensive. Its movements use very low stance and strong footing against the ground, such as the Mabu horse stance. This gives earthbenders a strong foundation for supporting massive rocks and counter-attacking with powerful solid strikes. Interestingly, earthbending also has another style involving higher stances, short and quick steps, and hands that are constantly kept close to the chest. This style is called Southern Praying Mantis. Its fight method relies heavily on sensitivity to physical contact and vibration. It's extremely efficient, allowing the fighter to strike precisely when an opponent gets within close range. Firebending was based on Northern Shaolin, which has an aggressive, explosive, fast, and offensive character. Firebenders use high jumping kicks, body rotations, and straight punches aimed directly forward. These punches can look almost like stabbing movement because the sharp of release of the energy. The basic principle involves using breathing and muscles to trigger internal energy or chi, which is projected outward through the hand, feet, and even the mouth. Finally, airbending was based on Bagwazang. Its main principle involved evasion, moving backward, and using momentum to strike an opponent's weak points through circular, agile, and highly dynamic movements. This style means airbenders rarely attack in a straight line, just because their body mechanic involves moving their feet around circular patterns, while keeping their palms open and rotating their upper body in a flexible way to imitate the movement of the wind.
In the beginning credits for Avatar: The Last Airbender, when Zuko would do the big whirlwind kick with the flame and come down and hit the ground, at the time I was recovering from an injury, and so I couldn't do that kick. We call it a one-legged whirlwind kick. And so I literally rolled over someone's back, like someone bent over, and then I just rolled over that person's back. The opening credits for Korra, they show the airbender does this crazy thing where he kicks this way and lays back that way. I ended up just holding Brian in my arms.
After all of these concepts had been carefully mixed together, Breakthrough Nickelodeon partnered with South Korean animation studio Tin House in 2003 specifically to present their idea to the executives. They created a pilot episode for the series Avatar: The Last Airbender, which ran for around 14 minutes. It focused on 4 characters: Aang, Kya, Sokka, and Zuko, along with Appa and Momo. Because the pilot was relatively short, the production test only presented the basic outline of the story. Aang and Sokka chase after and attempt to rescue Kya from Prince Zuko and his soldiers through a battle involving the 4 elements. The characters were also quite different from the versions we eventually saw in the finished series. Aang was originally portrayed as more relaxed and childish. He was even somewhat impulsive and liked tactical thinking because the heavy burden of being the Avatar hadn't really been explored yet. Then there was a girl named Kya, who was portrayed as more emotional and less motherly, with slightly different clothing details. Her brother Saka was basically just comic relief. Meanwhile, Prince Zuko, who served as the main plot driver, was portrayed as little more than a standard one-dimensional cruel antagonist. Thanks to extremely positive response from Nickelodeon's executives, the project was immediately greenlit for a 20-episode first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, with several reasons, suggestions, and corrections along the way. Believe in the story's potential. The executive believed the concept had potential because it was unique and fresh, changing a character's name. They requested a name change because Kya was already being used by another brand, which could potentially create trademark issues. The name was changed to Katara. The name Kya was later used for her mother, while Sokka remained unaffected because Kya was considered a minor character in this context. Adding a mentor character, Prince Zuko was considered too flat and needed someone to balance his character. That led to the creation of a comedic and wise mentor figure, Uncle Iroh. Recasting Aang's voice actor, Aang was originally voiced by Machel Musso, but the team felt his voice wasn't suitable for the long-term direction of the character, especially because the story would require greater emotional depth. The team held another audition and eventually chose Zach Taylor Asian. The animation budget was increased to better portray the story's epic scale. Tin House Inc. was also replaced by larger South Korean animation studios, GM Animation and Doctor Movie, for the official series. After that, production on the main series began. This included building the team, rewriting parts of the story, developing the narrative, and creating additional relevant characters after Aaron Ehaz joined as head writer.
Water. Earth. Fire. Air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. 100 years passed and my brother and I discovered the new Avatar, an airbender named Aang. And although his airbending skills are great, he has a lot to learn before he's ready to save anyone. But I believe Aang can save the world.
The series itself used a storytelling structure similar to traditional Western cartoons, with a three-arc structure, a beginning, a middle where the conflict developed, and an ending with a resolution. The goal was to make the story easy for audiences, especially children, to follow from beginning to end. The story was simplified through lighter dialogue between the characters while also applying the principle of show, don't tell. After several years of production, the first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, titled Book 1, Water, was finally released in 2005. It received tremendous praise from critics and became a major commercial success.
And I think the main reason for the shows is for the appeal is the show's theme of balance. From its inception, the series was always about Aang, a young hero who has the overwhelming task of restoring balance to a war-torn world, while at the same time he struggles with finding internal balance as he searches to understand who he is and his purpose in the world.
Aside from its anime-inspired visuals and animation style depicting traditional Asian cultures, the show also stood out because of its unusual and surprisingly deep plot for a children's program. It tackled subjects such as genocide, war trauma, and imperialism, yet presented them in a way that worked extremely well because they were told through the relationships between Aang, Katara, Sokka during their journey. This was further strengthened by Prince Zuko's emotional journey, which felt realistic and refreshing. Then came the second season, Book 2, Earth, released a year later. It was considered a masterpiece because it pushed the tension to another level, with a darker, more mature, and more structured story in almost every aspect. There was also the introduction of Toph Beifong. Originally, Toph had been conceived as a strong and muscular teenage boy. However, the writing team changed the character's genre because a tough blind girl who could earthbend using southern praying mantis techniques while also being sarcastic and strong-willed created a much more unique group dynamic for Aang and the others. Zuko was also given a much more vulnerable side. The audience got to see just how complicated the emotions of an originally cruel antagonist could be as they slowly began to soften and question his obsession with honor after going through plenty of painful experiences throughout his journey. That transformation eventually made him one of the most memorable characters in animated storytelling. Then came Princess Azula, who had crazy, tactical, intelligent, and dangerous personality. As the main antagonist alongside her team, Mai and Ty Lee, she created a genuinely terrifying threat. This became especially clear when the story focused heavily on the political intrigue surrounding Ba Sing Se during the second half of the season. The story introduced political conspiracies, brainwashing carried out by the Secret's daily force, and of course, the disappearance of Appa, which left a huge impression on viewers. Finally, the third season, Book 3 Fire, continued the story following the defeat at Ba Sing Se. It was also very well received because it successfully tied together the conflict that had been built up from the very beginning. During the first half of the season, Team Avatar had to disguise themselves while living in the Fire Nation, which was enemy territory. This allowed them to see firsthand how ordinary civilians were often just victims of the regime's propaganda. And this was where Zuko's character development reached its peak. He finally decided to turn against his father. Because all of these elements were developed and brought together throughout the series and eventually reached their peak in season 3. The story's message about spiritual peace and justice became especially powerful. The series consistently explored themes such as rejecting violence, redemption, life choice, relationships between people from different backgrounds, and the darker sides of chaos caused by war. All of this made the final battle against the Tyrant feel like a truly epic conclusion to the story of a world divided into 4 nations, each representing the philosophy of one of the 4 elements that support life.
It's not something you get a lot in American TV animation, you know, this continuous storyline where people actually change and they learn, they make mistakes, and they have to pay for those mistakes. And yeah, we never wanted to be preachy with the spirituality, and we don't claim to be experts in any of this stuff. We just admire it and draw from it in our own lives and try to infuse it into the work that we do.
So, what do you think? Would you rather have the story made more like a typical Western cartoon with a clear 3-act structure that begins and ends within a single episode? Or would you prefer it to be more like an anime, which each episode continues directly into the next? Let me know in the comments. Personally, I can imagine Avatar with an opening featuring licensed songs from a particular band. Alright, that's it from Breaking the IP this time. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye!